Good morning and welcome to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Jennifer and I love to make sewing videos. For this video, I plan to make a halter top and I wanted a project that was more simple and easy to make, so I can't wait. I also think I'm going to get a lot of use out of this top. It's literally going to be 101 degrees as the high today, so I need more summer tops, and this will be a great addition to my summer wardrobe because we're deep in it. With that being said, let me show you the pattern that I'll be using for today. The pattern that I'm going to be using is Simplicity 1203, and I'm going to be making view 2. It's over here on the bottom left, and it's just a simple halter top. It also has buttons in the back for closure, and I have the perfect fabric, so let me show you what I'm going to be using. This is the fabric that I'll be using for this project. I bought this at an antique store and it was only $3. I'm not sure what the fiber content is. I'm thinking it's cotton or somewhat of a cotton blend, but it's pretty breathable and I love this floral pattern with the bright red, so I can't wait to work with it. I also have just enough to make this halter top, so I'm very excited. Let's go ahead and jump into the mock-up so I can show you how it fits. Okay, so here I have the mock-up and it fits perfectly. So I don't think I'll be making any alterations, but yeah, I can't wait to make this top. So with that being said, let's go ahead and iron the fabric. Once all the pattern pieces were cut, I stay stitched the armhole and also the armhole facing since they were both on the bias. After that, I serged all the edges of the blouse. I moved on to sewing the tucks on the straps, and for this I backstitched at the ends. I'm sorry, that was a lot of S's. I didn't know how else to say that. Then I sewed the bust darts following the diagonal line. To finish this off, I usually tie 3 knots, then I snip the excess thread off. Lastly, I sewed the back darts, and both ends of these darts were going to be tied off, so I left a little thread tail at the ends, and I tied them off the same way. Following that, I pressed the tucks away from the center, and I also pressed the bust darts towards the center. Here I am pressing the front center seam 1/4 of an inch towards the inside. I will be sewing a straight stitch here later. And while I'm at the ironing board, I also pressed the back darts towards the center. Then I sewed a straight stitch on the edge of the center front. After that, I ironed the center front flat, and then I folded it again inwards, but this time 1 inch, and this will act as the facing. Next, I placed the left front piece on top of the right front piece and pinned them together. And here's where I'll be sewing a basting stitch just to hold this in place. After that, I began to attach the midriff piece to the bust pieces right sides together. And I'm just matching up the markings. And here I sewed another basting stitch. Seems like a lot of basting stitches, but I'd rather do this than seam rip a very tight stitch. Following that, I made sure there were no puckers, and thankfully there wasn't, so I went back to a 2mm stitch and sewed over the same seam. And when I was done, I removed the basting stitch, and I pressed this seam downwards. Here I'm sewing a top stitch on the same seam I'm working on. Then I picked out a rayon binding from my stash, and I was going to add this to the waistline to prevent any stretching of the fabric. After washing the binding, I ironed it flat. I also cut it down to the same measurement as the front piece. This won't be attached to the back bodice, so I'm only attaching it here. But before I sew on the binding, I proceeded to attach the lower front piece to the midriff right sides together, and here I sewed a basting stitch. After that, I placed the seam binding on top and I sewed it down using a 2mm stitch. I did this from the lower front side because I will end up pressing the seam upwards. And after all of that, I sewed a top stitch on this seam. Next, I added stabilizer to the button placket. I'm just using a lightweight stabilizer. Here I have the facing pieces for the armhole, and I pinned them right sides together. Then I sewed a straight stitch to secure them in place. And following that, I pressed these seams open. Oh my gosh, I'm so sweaty. Hello there. I have sweat about half of my makeup off, and I also put my hair in braids because it's too hot. But on that note, I decided to stop sewing and put the project aside. I got pretty far. I'm not gonna lie, I was kind of aiming to finish in one day. I've never made something in one day, so there's that, but I'm too slow of a sewist, and preparing the pattern pieces takes forever too. It's technically not even a day because I trace the pattern, wash the fabric and all of that. But it's okay, I'll accept that. I know that my time ranges from, I need at least 2 days to finish something. But lucky me, I have more time, so I'm gonna sew tomorrow and hopefully finish by then. I've also never worked with such a busy print. I mean, I've made gingham shorts, that was just an optical illusion within themselves, but this floral blouse is very busy. Sorry for that. You're probably watching the screen like, please stop, put it away. But I think it's a really cute print. I'm very picky when it comes to prints, so this is perfect for me. I love it, and I can't wait to finish. So with that being said, I'm gonna stop talking, clean up my mess, and eat some dinner. But I will see y'all tomorrow to finish up this top. Bye bye. Ow! That was dramatic, but also this ruler is very sharp. Why did I just tuck it in like that? Alright, bye. Good morning, it's day 2 of sewing. All I need to do today is sew up the sides, add the facing piece, and the buttons and buttonholes. And then I'm finally done with the top. So with that being said, let's jump into finishing up this top. Before that, I'm gonna switch the record. Okay, that's pretty good. Don't you dare fall. On this day, I started off by pinning the front and back bodice pieces right sides together on the sides. Then I sewed them in place using a straight stitch. After that, I pressed these seams open. Hello! I decided to quickly pause because I did in fact... Zoe's biting her bone. I don't want to take it away. Can't take the happiness from my child. But, what was I saying? Yeah, I added 2 inches to the whole bodice because I didn't realize that this was a size smaller than me. Should have paid attention there. Even though I made the mock-up, I didn't realize that these would overlap for the buttons. I was like, okay, it meets in the center. Let's go, but that would be perfect for a zipper, not for an overlap with buttons. So yeah, I added 2 inches. I should be good now with this extra panel. I think I showed y'all while I was filming, but I didn't film me adding it because, I don't know, when I see a problem, I'm like solving it right there in the moment. Forgot to turn on the camera. But yeah, I added the panel. It'll be finished the exact same way, and you can't even see it because it'll be folded under like that. But because I added 2 inches, which is 1 inch on each side, I also added 1 inch of the back facing piece because this will all be attached together. So I have this tiny little square here. But yeah, I wanted to show you that I added those 2 inches because I didn't want y'all to see that piece and be like, what's happening? I don't remember her adding that, but now you know, so it's all good. But I'm going to continue sewing this up. I'm feeling pretty positive that it'll fit now because before it was just lined up. But no, we are lapping over. Let's go. I don't know if you can see here, but I have these 2 little black X marks. What the pattern is telling me to do is fold up the bottom of the facing and then taper at that X mark. and then sew all this up. So I'm gonna iron it first. I don't know how I'm gonna sew that. It's a curved edge, but I guess I'll do it. And then the reason we're stopping here is because this part of the facing will be attached to the facing that is already on the blouse. So I don't know, I'm just gonna let the pattern take the wheel. All right, let's go. Okay, so here I did exactly what I was explaining, but I pressed the bottom of the facing 1/4 of an inch towards the inside. I made sure to taper at the X marking, and following that, I sewed a straight stitch while also tapering the stitch at the end. Next, I sewed the back panel center seam inwards 1/4 of an inch as well. Now I'm adding the facing pieces to the armhole right sides together. I'm just lining up all the markings. I also pressed the very end of the facing inwards 1/4 of an inch. Here's where I'll be folding the button placket inside, and then I also laid the armhole facing piece on top of it. This is so that when I sew this together, the armhole facing will be tucked inside. I hope that made sense. I'm trying here. After that, I sewed a basting stitch to attach them together. And after making sure there were no puckers, I sewed a 2mm stitch. Once I was done, I removed the basting stitch. And then I cut the seam allowance down to about 2/8 of an inch. I also clipped the seam allowance along the curved edge so that it could lay flat. Here I'm pressing the seam allowance towards the facing, and after I was done pressing, I sewed an understitch. Next, I'm attaching the straps right sides together. As I'm doing this, I'm making sure that the facing pieces are laying flat, and I sewed them together using a straight stitch. After that, I pressed the seam open. Here I'm folding the facing pieces inwards and ironing it down. These were already technically ironed down, but since I was attaching everything, I had to iron them open. So I'm just doing this again. And once I was getting the shape back to what it was originally, I made sure to place the neckline facing over the armhole facing, and I pinned them together. I moved the top to the bigger ironing board, and I continued to iron the facing piece inwards. While I'm here, I ironed the button placket as well. After that, I sewed a slip stitch to attach the facing pieces together. I'm making sure to only sew the facing fabric and not the front piece. And I also did a slip stitch to attach the armhole facing to the button placket. Then I sewed a basting stitch at the bottom of the placket. To finish the hem, I'm pressing it inwards about 1/4 of an inch, and I'm sewing a straight stitch to secure it in place. Then I added 4 buttonholes following the pattern's placement. Here I'm adding fabric glue to the buttonholes, and I let this dry for 24 hours, then I cut them open off camera. The last step is adding the buttons, and here I have some really bright ones. I'm sorry, they're like catching the light. But anyways, with that, the top is finally done, and now it's time for the reveal. Pink Floyd saxophone goes crazy. Hello, we finally made it to the end of the video, and now it's time for the wrap up. So for the blouse, I think I did a really good job. I have no notes. I love the shape and the fabric is really beautiful. I will say for the back, it asked me to add 4 buttons, but for me, I think I'm gonna add another 2 buttons in between the gaps because it's just too gapey. Like when I'm moving and I look back, I'm like, oh, it's literally sticking out. So I'll just add more buttons. I have more, thankfully. Also for the fabric, I only spent $3, so I saved a lot of money there. Sometimes fabric can get quite expensive, and stuff like that saves me money. Either way, this top is still very valuable because I spent a lot of time on it, and it's a one of one. Alright. But this top kind of reminds me of 1970s halter tops, and I have a few examples on my Pinterest board that I'll show you. But I can imagine myself wearing this with some bell bottoms, and that would be pretty cute. But I think this fabric might be from the 70s. When I bought it, it didn't have any information. It was just sold, and I was like, alright, I'll take it. But I'm thinking it's from the 70s. But it's a 50s pattern, so it's like the two combined. But fashion is cyclical, and there's always decades borrowing from other decades. Another thing that's gone through my mind is vintage is usually about 100 years back, and then prior to that it's antique. But then what if the time keeps going forward? Are those things no longer vintage? Like, I can't imagine myself calling 50s antique. So we need new names, because I am confused, but there's that. I hope you're confused too. Anyways, I'll stop talking. But yeah, I really love the way this top came out. It was an easy sew, and I can see myself making more, maybe in different colors and prints. I also love this top with these capris that I've also made in the past. I've been wanting to make more capris, but maybe one day I'll do batch sewing. I don't know yet. I'm more interested in making new things and seeing what my style is, but I'm having a lot of fun, and I want to thank you all for joining me in my journey too. But with that being said, I want to say thank you so much for watching, and I hope you have a beautiful day. I will see you on the next one. Bye!